This week we come to number 10 in our series, The Promise, God's Everlasting Covenant. This is the New Covenant. And as we get into it, we discover the New Covenant isn't new at all. It's the same covenant as has been going on since the beginning in very many ways. Some people in theology classes will divide up the covenants into 7 or whatever. God is making the same kind of agreement with his people, which is, I want to be your God. I want you to be my people. That's what he's talking about. And to make the point, the new covenant, which Jesus talks about, this is the new covenant in my blood. He says that there in the upper room during the Last Supper. There is a new covenant back there in Jeremiah. Let's look at Jeremiah 31. Verses 31, 33. Look, the time is coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new agreement with the people of Israel and Judah. This is the agreement I'm going to make with the people of Israel at that time, declares the Lord. I will put my laws inside them and write them in their minds. I will be their God and they will be my people. What has God wanted since the beginning? Just what he said at the end of those verses there. He wants to be their God and they his people. So as we think about that, isn't that the same covenant going all the way through? And then he said something also very significant in that verse there, the last one, Jeremiah 31, 33. I will put my laws inside them and write them in their minds. The old versions say hearts, but hearts were where you did your thinking. So I've translated that in the Free Bible version as minds, because this is where the laws need to be written, not on the pump, as it were, the heart being just a pump. God wants us to think about these things. He wants us to consider them, to use our mental apparatus, if you like, to examine what he is saying. That's why he's giving us these laws, because he wants us to understand what he really is like, and he is interested in helping us. What are God's laws for? He puts these laws inside us and writes us in our minds. Why? Is it to control us? Is it to please him? No, none of these things. It's because he knows this is what truly helps us in our lives. That's why he does this. Jesus, as we've said, talks about this agreement. And in Matthew 5, he reinterprets the meaning of the covenant law that we've been talking about. You have heard that it was said, but I say to you, pointing out what's behind all those laws. All the laws that God gave have a reason, and it goes back to the mind that thinks, because before you actually commit some kind of sin, you've actually thought about it. So let's go back to the thinking. In Hosea, God even describes the covenant, the agreement, in terms of marriage vows. Foreigners are supposed to be included in God's covenant, says Isaiah. Hebrews 8 speaks of a new and better agreement. And in Hebrews 10:4, that we're given to read, the sanctuary system didn't actually remove sins. The blood of bulls and goats doesn't wipe away sins. That's the shocking statement made there in Hebrews, because it's only God who can help us deal with that. Sin is sin. What's done is done. You cannot move it around from person to animal to holy place, back to animal, all the rest of it. What you've done is done. But Jesus takes the consequences of those sins upon himself to demonstrate what does happen, and he dies that tragic death because of separation, because he experiences the results, the consequences. Sin pays a wage. The wage is death, and God is not paying that wage. Do remember that. So as we think this week about this new covenant, let's make sure that we make it new in our minds as we think about all that God's done to win us back to love and to trust.